All right. So LD just dropped a video, legendary drops, I should say, about PoE2. And I have been quite enjoying the game. So I'm curious to what he has to say about it. Let's get right into it.
Path of Exile is a wake-up call. You know, I think in a lot of cases, a lot of players would look at live service games pretty much across the board and never think that a ethical live service game could ever exist. And we've had some in the past. But when you look at a studio like Grinding Gear Games, you can see pretty much across the board that players hold them in the exact same regard as Larian Studios, Digital Extremes with Warframe, or FromSoft. Studios that they...
This is true. This is really true. So before I really started learning about ARPGs, I heard a bunch about PoE1 and Grinding Gear Games and how they treated their players really well, right? PoE1 is 10 years of good decision making that led to PoE2. Like, that's just what it is.
They know that any changes they make or any games they come out with always will have the player in mind. They trust that those companies will have the player in mind. Trust. Now, that's something that we rarely see anymore, especially...
Yeah, seriously. That's huge, right? When you release an early access and charge the player base $42, I don't know what it is for you in US, but for me it was like 42 plus tax. And people play it, buy it, and return to it daily, because we're gonna see the numbers for player retention in the video, I'm pretty sure. Like, that says a lot in the modern age of gaming, where people generally don't do that because a lot of these studios can't really be trusted. Your Activisions, your fucking Ubisoft, your whatever, right? Like, name pretty much any AAA dev who was esteemed back in the day. They're just not held in the same regards as they were, just by making horrible choices for the player.
Especially within this industry, I know that I very rarely trust any of these companies, and the vast majority of us feel like we can't anymore, especially when it comes to live service games. That's something that we don't normally see there.
Yeah, there's very few exceptions. Like, Riot is relatively trusted. Relatively, I think they have made some pretty shit decisions lately with gotcha skins for League, and then I think we're gonna look at this later, but they've upped the price again for some of the like really premium tier skins. Like, it's falling apart for a lot of like Western devs. I do believe GGG is Western still, but they have done the right decisions.
Because, well,
Made the right decisions.
these are the titles that have come to symbolize everything that's wrong with the games industry today. They exploit our time and our money. They're looking to manipulate our wallets. Heck, they're trying to manipulate our minds. They're spending millions on gambling and casino research, trying to figure out how to keep players in games longer and spending more money rather than trying to deliver us meaningful content. That part always seems to be lost in...
Which is the complete opposite of how GGG does their games. Right? The gambling is within the game, and you do not have to pay money for it. Right? The gambling is upgrading your gear. That's the gambling. That's all it is, right?
in the wind somewhere. Ethical, well-supported live service games seem like a myth. There's only a few of them that are out there, but that's because the vast majority of these companies do not have the respect that's necessary for the audience or the passion for creativity. I don't think... Maybe it's just me.
I don't know how to, because when you think of like Call of Duty, so Call of Duty has 3,000 developers working on it. And somehow the game is the same every year. So it's like you have 3,000 brains working on a game, and by some miracle of God, it hasn't really innovated that much in like 10 years. Like, how? Right? Like, I don't get it. It's like the people who actually would innovate and push the genre forward are getting fired for disagreeing. That would be my theory, is that anyone who doesn't align with the company's direct goal of making money just gets thrown out. Like, that's probably what happens.
But for some odd reason, things just feel different. It just hasn't been the same for a long time. It doesn't.
Yeah, like I remember when Black Ops 2 released. That was like my favorite game that year. And there hasn't been any other game that's ever released like it. You could say Black Ops 3 was like a return to form, but I think that that game also had a ton of problems, right? Loot boxes that literally made me leave the game because I didn't want to spend money to get the guns that I was getting killed by in game. So, yeah, I don't think they ever did return to form.
It doesn't feel like developers and publishers are making games because, well, it's for the love of the game. They're not making games that they actually want to play. It's all for investors and the money and for political or social political reasons or whatever it might be. But
it's the same thing for movies too, right? Like you see all these movies release where like nobody watches them because nobody cares about them.
In the case of many of the games that I've seen be successful over the last couple of years, it ends up being those games that have that old soul, that have that old heart. When I look at a game like Path of Exile or Baldur's Gate 3 or something like that, these are the games that are succeeding right now. And Grinding Gear Games is...
Yeah, Baldur's Gate 3, by the way, still has like, I think 90,000 concurrent players daily. I could be wrong on that. I could be a little bit off on that, but it's either weekly or daily. And that's crazy. It's a single player RPG that came out last year. That doesn't really happen anymore. It's doing even better than Elden Ring. Like, that's pretty insane if you think about it.
It's done an incredible job at maintaining and cultivating an audience that trusts them, truly trusts them. And that's something that's really special. So today what I want to do is I want to talk about the history of Path of Exile. I want to talk about...
Hell yeah. I didn't know this is where the video was going, but I'm fucking down because I'm super curious. I was not around for PoE 1. I have like 40 hours in the game. I think it's a good game. It's just not my game. Like for some reason, it never really clicked for me, but I can still appreciate the game that they've built over the last 10 years. But I've played like 2 or 3 leagues and like the gameplay is good. It's not bad. It's just PoE 2 is really where I'm at, just because the gameplay is a little bit slower if you're not playing Monk. But if you're playing Monk, then it's a lot like PoE 1. But yeah.
Path of Exile 2, and I want to talk about where all this is heading and how Grinding Gear Games has brought back something that this industry has lost: trust. Grinding Gear Games was founded in 2006 by 3 developers from New Zealand: Chris Wilson, Jonathan Rogers, and Eric Olofsson. Each of them,
oh my god, that's like
brought a
OG
unique skill
footage.
set to the table, with Wilson specializing in software development and Rogers and Olofsson focusing in game design and programming. Their journey began with a shared passion.
This looks sick. Like this looks very similar to what I would think like Diablo 1 or Diablo 2 would look like.
For action role-playing games, especially Diablo 2. Wilson, frustrated with the industry's shift towards more casual play, envisioned something of a return to the game's roots, focusing on deep gameplay, meaningful character progression, and a dark, immersive world.
I'm pretty sure that boss we just saw is still in the game. I'm pretty sure you beat him in Act 1.
Vision would eventually take shape as Path of Exile. At the time, Diablo 2 was the pinnacle of ARPGs.
Damn, even back then, the ice picks or whatever, they looked sick.
And Wilson and his
That's
friends
impressive.
spent thousands of hours in its world. But after exhausting it, they had turned to other games like Torchlight, Dungeon Siege, and Titan Quest, only to find that those games didn't have that same staying power as Diablo 2. They wanted a new game to play. They recognized that there was a gap within the market. No game had captured that same depth and replayability as Diablo 2, so they decided to build something that could fill that void.
For back then, this game looks really good. This is probably like 10 years ago, and this game looks really good for that.
Diablo 2 successor that you could play forever. From the beginning, Grinding Gear Games adopted a simple but effective philosophy, one grounded in common sense principles. I know that's something that's relatively foreign nowadays, but I mean, if you think about...
Oh my god, it's Jonathan. Look, he's got a giant ponytail. That's sick. Shout out John, let's go.
The idea of making a Diablo 2 successor alone is already a common sense kind of thing because, well, there was a game that was out there that there was no competition for. A decade gap between releases. One of the most popular games, one of the most...
Wait, did they really wait 10 years to make Diablo 3? And then I think they waited like 8 years to release Diablo 4. Jesus. Dude, Blizzard is just asleep at the wheel.
Profitable games of all time. Why wouldn't you want to make a game that could compete with that. It's a slam dunk. The foundation of that game would be built around 5 core pillars. The first of the pillars was visceral action combat. In 2006, when they started development on the game, many ARPGs at the time had very simple combat, but they felt that a real successful ARPG needed to look and feel like real action. Many RPGs and action RPGs at the time were emulating World of Warcraft because that was the most popular game that was out. However, they wanted something more dynamic, and that's what they went after. The second pillar of theirs was randomly generated levels. ARPGs are a grind. Hundreds of hours are going to be played on a single character, and every single run needs to feel fresh and unpredictable. Otherwise, players are going to get bored.
Yeah, that's something I feel like Diablo 4 sort of failed to do for me. That was sort of a big issue. When I would do dungeons, they would all feel the same, or look the same, or have the same mechanics, and I'm like, okay, great, thanks for that.
Number 3 was randomly generated items. This is the heart of any loot or systems-driven ARPG. The thrill of chance and the chase for better loot is what keeps us hooked. That's why we keep playing these games. Everyone wants to find that god roll item or the perfect combination of gear that none of their friends have or have even seen. The fourth is the most interesting one to me, and it's a secure online economy. Now, this is something that I think a lot of games overlook, and they felt the same way, and I'd argue it's one of the things that really sets their game apart from everyone else. They understood the importance of a stable, fair economy because it gives players and the items that they find more value. Because, well, now other players have a value that's associated to that item, and they can trade with other players. Not only is this making your runs more valuable because you're finding things of value, but also it's giving a lot of flexibility that's needed in a game that has so much build diversity. Number 5 is deep character customization, which pretty much ties in with everything else that's here. It's the one thing that scares players away from Path of Exile, myself included for many years, by the way. And it's the design pillar that they've sunk probably the most effort into. Players need the freedom to be able to shape their characters in unique ways. You want to have your own personal expression in the game. However, Path of Exile throws convention out the window and says that any class can be anything. A witch can use a bow and arrow, a ranger can summon armies of the dead. Just do whatever you want. And that freedom is what brought so many players into this game. These pillars would come to reflect a studio that wasn't aiming for immediate, overwhelming financial success, but a studio that just wanted to create a game that would deeply resonate with players that were a fan of that genre. They wanted to take the foundation that was set by Diablo 2 and other ARPGs and stretch it as far as it could go. Essentially, they wanted to make their dream game, and that's exactly what they did. Initially, Grinding Gear's modest goal was to attract 10,000 players. They felt that's what they needed to be able to stay sustainable at the very least.
That's interesting. That's kind of a low amount, but when you think about it, if you can build that trust with 10,000 players to where they're gonna like 1,000 of them, even 1,000, right? They spend, I don't know, $10 a month, right? They buy a new skin every month. If you're like a really small dev team, that can work.
While they were working with a very small skeleton crew at the time, but Path of Exile ended up debuting in 2013 to far more than they expected, a surge of up over 70,000 concurrent players on.
That's crazy for back then, I'm pretty sure. That's a lot of players. 2013. So I was really fucking young in 2013. Definitely didn't have a PC yet. But I would assume that's a giant number.
On launch. However, that success didn't last. As player numbers began to drop, Grinding Gear Games found themselves in a position in which, well, maintaining that momentum was going to require a lot more than the incremental content updates that they were doing. The studio's early strategy was frequent updates. Basically, every single week they wanted to add in new armor, weapons, and skills, but that wasn't generating the kind of sustained excitement that they wanted. Basically, ever since they tasted the success of 70,000 concurrent players, they wanted to get back up there. Basically, Path of Exile needed something more to be able to keep the community engaged, so the team ended up experimenting with different challenge leagues and economy resets.
I'm a big fan of experimentation. I think that's so important. I think you need to try. You need to just throw shit at the wall and just see what sticks. Like, you just have to. And I think gaming studios have sort of forgotten that, right? They don't really take big risks anymore, which ends up costing them actually more in the end, I would say. Like, if you don't take big risks, then you don't take home big lessons.
They discovered that resetting the economy gave both new and veteran players a level playing field, basically creating a sense of anticipation.
Oh, they started out with no economy reset? That's kind of crazy. Damn. I mean, it's crazy because now they do it all the time. I'm sure it wasn't that crazy at the time.
And renewal, where everybody can start off at the same point. The challenge leagues would introduce new content and different mechanics into the game, which would then give players something new and fresh to be able to tackle. Now, despite their best efforts, the first few attempts at introducing these features, such as Anarchy and Onslaught leagues, didn't really produce the same kind of sustained player retention that they were looking for, but they didn't give up for the...
Yeah, I think that's important. You don't give up. If you have an idea and you think it's good, you just keep doing it. Because you're going to get it right at some point. It just might not be the first time.
1.0 launch of Path of Exile, they included an economy reset, a challenge league, Act 3 of their campaign, and a new character in the Scion. This time, player numbers skyrocketed again, surpassing 70,000 players once more. It became clear that new content wasn't enough. They needed something significant enough to be able to capture the attention of both journalists and the players to spark excitement across the community. Now, as it is with live service games, after the 1.0 launch, the developers yet again found themselves under pressure as player numbers began to decline. They ended up releasing Sacrifice of Vol expansion, which introduced new bosses and skill gems. That brought another temporary spike in activity, but it wasn't the lasting success that they desired. They also launched Forsaken Masters, which included customizable player housing and crafting systems, but once again, a short spike was short-lived. As more leagues like Torment and Bloodlines were released, the team found that small content patches just weren't enough to be able to keep players engaged in the long term. They questioned whether it was time for them to move on and just make another game. However, there were...
Thank God they didn't. Thank God they didn't. Holy man. Could you imagine? Oh, that would have been so sad if they moved on. Because then Diablo would just have free reign. And I don't know if you would get games like Last Epoch or like any other like massive ARPGs.
There was something...
It like realistically, Diablo could be in the same position where Call of Duty is, where Call of Duty just beats everybody. It's almost impossible to compete with Call of Duty nowadays, right? X Defiant tried. They failed horribly. Obviously, there's a lot of reasons why that happened, but they tried, didn't succeed.
Something really incredible happening in the background, because through all of this trial and error, Grinding Gear Games was learning some really crucial lessons that would end up setting the stage for their future success. I mean, keep in mind, every single update they made was added content to the game, making it bigger and bigger and bigger, giving more content for more players to sink their teeth into when they would eventually try the game for the first time or return to it after a while away. They realized that the economy resets were definitely necessary. They needed to keep those in there because it kept the game fresh. They had also learned that the small content patches were not creating enough buzz or excitement to retain players or even try to reach new players, and they also learned that mid-league balancing was often upsetting their player base, especially when a lot of their hard-earned builds and gear...
Yeah. That's also an approach that they're taking with PoE 2 right now in the beta or in the early access. Is they didn't do a giant like balancing patch as they released a lot of the fixes to the end game.
Were essentially bricked. However, there was still one thing that was plaguing the game, and they couldn't figure out what it was. In comes Kripparrian, a Twitch streamer and YouTuber known for being...
Holy shit, he looks so young.
The first person and the only person to beat Inferno difficulty in Diablo 3 on hardcore, as that difficulty was later than toned down in future patches.
Yeah, I've heard about this. This guy was insane at Diablo 3.
Honestly, this is still one of the most incredible feats in ARPGs, absolute legend, by the way. However, Kripparrian's input...
Dude, respect to that guy. He was around... Dude, he's been around forever. Holy. Shout out Crip, Jesus.
On Path of Exile was pivotal. He had spoke to Chris Wilson and emphasized the importance about predictable content releases, explaining that players need to know when new content is coming and when to expect regular updates. Using an example, he said that...
Dude, look at him now. That's him, by the way. Look at him now. Holy. He's a nice studio now. Might be a little bit addicted to caffeine, but hey, man, who isn't? Who isn't?
He streamed every day and posted content every day at the exact same time because people come to expect it. And the minute that you're not there, well, they go to look for someone else to entertain them. The developers ended up taking this advice to heart, and they transformed the way that the game was supported. 13-week cycles. with 2 major content patches each year and 2 smaller patches in between.
Okay, so they did small, big, small, big. 13 weeks, 13 weeks. Okay. So that's interesting. So this is 2019? Okay. So this was like 5 years ago. Or 6 years ago, I guess.
Players could then rely on a consistent
Almost.
rhythm of new content and a full economy reset to keep things fresh. And this is where the game really picked up steam, because that schedule started with Talisman League in 2015, followed by Essence, Breach, Legacy, and others. The introduction of Atlas of Worlds with Path of Exile 3.0 marked a significant turning point as it added mapping and a more defined endgame to the game. As they continued refining their approach, they were able to introduce new mechanics like Bestiary, Incursion, Delve, Betrayal, all while keeping what players enjoyed and removing what players didn't. This is what helped to maintain the game's success and popularity over the years, and from my perspective, this is one of the most special components of...
One of the things that I will say about why it was so smart to make PoE 2 is, for someone like me, trying to enter a game like PoE 1 was quite daunting. There's 10 years of systems and mechanics that have been implemented that I have no idea what they're about. And to think about learning all of those things and play other games just felt way too daunting. If this is like your only game, you're dedicating all your gaming time to like PoE 1, it's for sure like not that big of a deal. But if you're someone who's looking to play like, I don't know, like maybe 5 hours a week, PoE 1 is kind of not the game for that, I would say. But hey, maybe you have a different opinion, but that's kind of how I feel about that.
The game. And it's the fact that the players ultimately influence what this game looks like over time as they vote in and out different seasonal elements. So not only does the game have an incredibly deep build variety with skill gems and an expansive skill tree and flexible classes, but year over year, the game's world is permanently transformed by the will of its players. There is always more to do after each league, and new and returning players are going to have just that much more content to experience. What I find truly fascinating about the development and success of Path of Exile is how the player experience is consistently prioritized in every aspect of the game, whether it's balancing the game and ensuring fairness by avoiding any changes mid-league, keeping or removing content based on player feedback, how they communicate directly with their audience. Hell, the whole reason that they went free to play is because they didn't think that anyone would buy it, and this is the only way that they could make the game available to the most people. Everything was driven by a desire for a player-first experience. This mentality even extends to the game's monetization strategy, and from my perspective, this is why the game has remained so successful.
Yeah, they respect the players. They don't do weird bullshit. Their shop is called Microtransaction Shop. They're not trying to hide anything. They're just like actually doing things for the player and talk directly to the player too, which is a huge part of their success. Is they talk to their players and they engage with their community. Something that you don't really see nowadays with these bigger studios is they might do like some tweet about changes in the game, but they're not engaging with players afterwards, or very infrequently. That's something different that XDefiant did do with their lead dev, I think. I don't remember his name, but he did engage with the community, and though he couldn't deliver on his promises, it was a good sign. It was a good move. And it could have worked if the studio was able to actually deliver on a lot of the promises that they were making. They just sort of couldn't.
Path of Exile monetizes through 2 main channels, stash tabs and cosmetics. Neither of these are essential to enjoying the game unless you like hoarding items or you want to engage with the game's online trade economy. Most casual players are likely going to play this game solo or with friends, playing the game solo self-found without ever even needing to have a premium stash tab in the first place. I spent money the first time I was playing the game. I assumed that I would have to spend money like any other free-to-play game, only to find myself never even using any of that extra space because I played it like I would any other ARPG. I picked up what I needed, and I threw away what I didn't. Now, what I absolutely love is that Grinding Gear Games has publicly stated that their monetization approach is shaped by the game itself, not the other way around. As an example,
that's really important.
New cosmetics release when a league starts, but as that league starts to wind down and a new league is set to launch, wide sweeping discounts come across the entire store for returning players to be able to pick up things on the cheap. Also, can I just say how refreshing it is to see that this is one of the very few games that are out?
I could be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure you can just buy anything from any previous. There's no like FOMO mechanics, which pretty much every other game has. Valorant has it. I don't know if League has it in some ways, but pretty much every other game now has FOMO mechanics, which are complete garbage and need to go away.
Out there might be one of the only games that's out there that doesn't obfuscate their currency and try to confuse players on how much items are worth.
Yeah, 100%. That's super. Yeah, shout out to them for that. And in PoE1, I'm pretty sure you can literally buy the exact dollar amount of currency, right? You can buy currency that's worth $1 to your dollar.
Or how much money they're spending. For instance, $30 is 300 coins. $50 is 500 coins. I am so sick and tired of seeing companies with 13 different premium currencies, all of them with different exchange rates and making...
Dude, it's fucked. It's so fucked. Every game does this, and it's incredibly frustrating. And this is where I actually think the government should step in. I actually think governments should step in, Western governments. I don't know about what Eastern government, I can't speak on them, but Western governments should step in and say that there should be an established like 1-to-1 ratio. Right? Or it shouldn't be this confusing. You should be able to allow players to buy the exact amount of currency for the item that they're buying and not have leftover currency for no fucking reason that just chills on the account. That's like money that they've lost for pretty much no reason until they make another purchase. And if they never make another purchase, then they overspent for absolutely zero reason. None at all. It is incredibly it's just not player focused. It's not. It's fucked.
Making it near impossible to see how far your money goes. In a sea of greed and psychological manipulation, Path of Exile is taking the high road. I think what makes Path of Exile so compelling isn't just its depth or its innovative gameplay, it's the studio's unwavering commitment to putting the player first. Grinding Gear Games has consistently, time and time again, demonstrated a rare ability to adapt, learn from their mistakes, and evolve, all while staying true to what their vision for the game is. The game's success is a direct result of their focus on a balanced, player-driven ecosystem where content and the monetization are carefully considered, ensuring
Yes, exactly.
that the player experience comes before anything else. From the beginning, their goal was not just to build a game, but to build a game that players would not want to stop playing. Not because they felt like they had to keep playing the game, but because they wanted to keep playing the game and support it. When I look at the origins and the original success of Path of Exile, it all just feels so common sense. I mean, just the idea of them making a Diablo 2 successor when there was like a 10-year gap where there was just nobody that would...
Dude, I wonder when he wakes up. Because every time he starts a video, it's bright here. And then by like the halfway point to even like earlier, it's completely dark. He like it's winter here in Canada, so I'm sure he's like in a somewhere that's like that gets less daylight.
It was making a game that even stepped up to the doorstep of what that game delivered. It just makes so much sense. They just took all of the core pillars that made that game successful and expanded on them infinitely for the most part, and that's exactly what players want. And it feels common sense because that's what a lot of players, fans of those games, would want. That's exactly what we were thinking of. And the funny thing is, well, they're fans. That's the game that they wanted to make. That's how they came up with the idea to make the game in the first place, because they put in the time. They already had thousands of hours into Diablo 2. It makes a lot of sense that that's the game that they would make. You know, I've covered a lot of Ubisoft and their downfall, and a lot of the issues that that company's had, and I think a lot of people either don't know or don't realize that they didn't get into this industry because they wanted to make games. They got into it because they wanted to distribute games. And I think that some of the most successful games, some of the studios that we've grown to love, got into this industry because there was a game that they wanted to make. Path of Exile 2.
It's the same thing for any art form, right? If you think of any like really successful artist who isn't just doing the cookie cutter bullshit, like that's what it is. Like I think of Polyphia, I think of Avenged Sevenfold, I think of like all these bands that I've loved forever, and like, yeah, that's exactly how it is. Yeah, 100%.
That's the game that they wanted to make. Gamers making games for gamers. Bungie and the original Halo, Larian Studios, and Divinity. I look at Game Science and Black Myth Wukong. You have to have a fundamental love for the thing that you want to make to really understand it the right way. You have to understand the audience because you are the audience. That's how it works. You're making the game that you want to make, and that is so important in this industry. And I think it's something that a lot of these companies are getting away from, and it's probably one of the reasons why a lot of their games are struggling. I mean, even just the idea of having a trade league, an active online economy for your game. You have to really understand what the phrase all players means, because that's how you make a game that reaches all players, because you end up creating new types of players inside these games. I didn't realize this until I put over 200 hours into Path of Exile 2, but
I'm not there yet. I don't know how many hours because I've left the game on too much, but if I had to guess, I'm probably at like 80 hours. Probably. Maybe a little bit more. But I mean, it's longer than I've played pretty much any other ARPG. So that's quite a feat for me, because I usually get bored before I can even reach endgame. That's what happened with Last Epoch. That's what happened with Diablo 4. Diablo 3, I never even finished the campaign. I'm not even going to lie. Like pretty much all of the other ARPGs, I get bored before I can even get to endgame, which isn't, I don't think it's necessarily a fault of the game, except maybe for like Diablo 4. But PoE 2 has kept me interested, and now I'm into mapping for PoE 2, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm actually really enjoying it, which is really surprising, because I generally don't care that much.
I'm a merchant. I like sitting in my base and selling gear. I like picking up gear and rolling it and crafting on it and seeing if I can find something, even if it's not for my class, just so I can throw it up and make some money. I like sitting back and watching YouTube videos and stuff like that. And
yeah, I'm the same way. I'm not super serious about like RPGs, and I think PoE 2 is a game that has a good experience for most kinds of players, right? Hardcore SSF, hardcore, like whatever it is. There is a way that you can enjoy PoE 2 that you can tailor to you, which I think is really good. I think that's one of the things that has helped this game stay in the top sellers for Steam and also keep its active player base is there's not one play style for everybody. You can really tailor your experience to your own play style, which is lovely.
Selling the gear that I've collected over my playthrough, and I find a lot of enjoyment in that. To be able to make that kind of experience, you have to be a fan of those kind of games. You have to really understand the players in a way that very few do. You know, I actually interviewed Jonathan Rogers, the director, one of the directors of Path of Exile, and he had this
Really? Okay, I need to go watch that, because I didn't see that. I need to go watch that. Okay, we're gonna watch it. I'll try and remember. We can watch it tomorrow. I'm down for that.
banger line that I need to share with you guys.
Well, at the end of the day, what we're doing is making a game that we enjoy, right? Like we're making a game that we think is cool. And I think the danger really comes when you try to make a game for an audience that you're not part of.
Yeah. Dude, he's on the money. Holy shit. He's so on the money. Because when you think about all these like massive game flops, that's sort of what it is. It's people making games that they wouldn't play themselves and then massively just fucking it up so bad.
Like I think that's where you start to make things that appeal to nobody. You know, because you probably the people you're trying to make a game for that aren't you feel patronized by whatever it is you're doing, and there's
a lot of examples of that.
Yeah, and you don't, and also you don't, you know, once again, you just don't know what it is they want. Like the only person that I know, like the person I know the most, what they want is myself, right?
Yeah.
Like I know exactly what I'm looking for in a game, and so and also like a lot of the people on the team as well, like.
That's also why like not everybody should be successful, because maybe the thing that you want to make nobody wants, right? That's sort of kind of how I see my music career. Is I made really good music and I made a lot of mistakes, but I made really good music that I enjoyed. But that's the only thing that I can do. I can't make music for an audience that I don't care for. That's just what it is, right? And I've sort of accepted that maybe I just wasn't ever supposed to succeed. Or there's a potential too that I just made too many mistakes that made it so. that I shouldn't have succeeded and shouldn't succeed, which is also fine. But I think a lot of it comes down to like ego. A lot of these massive gaming fuck ups are just based on ego, in my opinion.
You know, like the people on the development team really need to like what it is they're making. So, as I said, we're making a game for ourselves primarily, and I think if we do that, that we will find an audience of people who are like us, who enjoy.
And I don't know if he's going to touch on this, but it's that, but it's also being willing to fail for a long time before reaching that peak, right? And for them, that peak is probably PoE 2 for now, right? Until they make another game that can be as successful. But PoE 2 is not even fully out, keep in mind, too, right? So the peak, I don't even think they've reached their peak. Because right now, you have to pay money for it, but when it fully releases, you don't.
This kind of thing.
The danger comes when you're making a game for an audience that you're not a part of. Doesn't that just sum up things just so succinctly? You know, I look at a lot of the games that have failed over the last couple of years, especially with the live service games, and in every single case, I see a game that was made for what they thought people wanted, not for what people actually wanted, because they don't understand those things, because they're not making those games for themselves. You know, I look across the entire industry, and whether it's monetization or how these games are being developed or marketed, it feels like an alien in a skin suit. I've been trying to find a word that sums up a lot of the issues that I see in the games industry. It's forced. That's the word. It's forced. The monetization is...
Yeah, it's on the money. Yeah, that's actually a perfect description of it. Yeah. Concord, forced. Star Wars, what is it? Star Wars Rebels? Or whatever the... No. That's a TV show. Outlaws. That's it. Forced. It doesn't feel like games that were made by people who are passionate about the genre, right? You think of like Marvel Rivals, and it's like... This is a game from someone who previously played Overwatch, enjoyed it, but then threw their own spin on it. Not one person, but like a team, let's say.
Is forced. The narratives are forced. The social agendas are forced. The characters, the themes, the genres, everything is just so forced. And players are rejecting it. They're not clicking with it because it's not made for them, because it's not made by people that are making the games for them.
I mean, it's not made for anybody, really, if you think about it. It's not made for them. It's not made for the player. Who the fuck is it made for? Like, actually, who is it made for? Nobody.
Themselves, and that's how things should be. And that's why Path of Exile 1 succeeded. And from my perspective, that's why Path of Exile 2 is going to go even further.
Yes, 100%. I think that the game's reputation is making it possible for it to go so far. Because they have built so much player goodwill, and that goodwill is going to travel through word of mouth of other players, which is huge. The best marketing is word of mouth marketing. It's not ad marketing, because very few people will ever click on an ad and actually make a purchase from that ad. Most people will make decisions from word of mouth. If you think about like a movie that you were recommended by a friend that you know has good taste in movies, how likely are you to watch that movie? Now, how likely are you to see that same movie in an ad and go watch it? A lot less likely.
Launching into early access, Path of Exile 2 quickly soared up to over 578,000 players, more than double the peak concurrent player count of the original Path of Exile, while pulling similar numbers across PlayStation and Xbox. Now, well over a month since its launch, it's still maintaining around 300,000 players on Steam, ranking in the top 10.
What the fuck? Jesus. That is insane. All time is almost 600K. Concurrent is 132. Almost 133. Holy shit, that's huge.
Most played games on the platform.
And their peak for PoE 1 in the early days was 70K.
Now, keep in mind that this
That's nearly double in concurrence.
breakout success happened at the exact same time that Marvel Rivals
What a surprise. He's playing Monk. Everybody's playing Monk. It's so funny.
was released to massive player numbers. While neither of these games share really anything similar outside of being a live service game, we typically see popular games being affected in some way.
If you're wondering why he's playing Monk, that shit was here, went down here in like 2 seconds.
However, neither of these games were bothered by either release. I think it's incredibly important to take note of the fact that not only was there another popular release around the time of this game's launch, but it also happens to be a free-to-play game that's unfinished, and they were selling access to the game for a minimum of a $30 supporter pack. There are a lot of factors here to be able to turn players away, but the players ignored them, and for good reason. I now have well over 200 hours played into Path of Exile, and even as a content creator, that isn't normal for me. I tend to bounce around to different games while I work on different things or research different things. However, Path of Exile 2 has genuinely become a problem for me. I'm just going to say that.
Dude, everybody is saying it, by the way. It's not just him. I did another video for another content creator who played like 250 hours. And he was like, yeah, this game is a problem for me. Yeah, this game is incredible. I mean, I hope it wins Game of the Year. It's my Game of the Year for sure. For 2025, when it releases, it will be 100%.
It has completely ruined my entire workflow. Every single day that I sit down, I need to start writing or recording something. I tell myself, I'm just going to do a quick map or two, and then poof, my entire day is gone in an instant. Path of Exile 1 didn't click for me. I tried. I really tried.
Yeah, dude, I agree. Yeah, PoE 1 did not click for me either. But PoE 2, man, holy shit. PoE 2 clicked instantly. I remember from the first second that I played Mercenary in that like forest area, killing like wolves and shit, I was like, oh, yeah, this game is going to be a problem.
Right. I love ARPGs. However, years of added content, systems, and depth made the original game just too big to consume.
Yeah, he said exactly what I said. So I think this is a pretty common like thought process.
I didn't want to watch 2-hour videos to understand build.
Yeah, that's another thing too. It's not only the time that you have to spend in the game, it's the time that you have to spend outside of the game learning it.
Crafting. There were so many mechanics and things like that to learn that I didn't even know.
And also like external software, loot fill, like there's so many things that you have to sort of engage with on top of 10 years of systems being built that pushed people away. And I'm sure Grinding Gear games like realize this along the way. They're like, it's going to be very difficult for us to grow if we don't try and do something about this. And PoE 2 was their idea, and I think it was great. Good job.
What I should be doing and what I shouldn't be doing. And there was just so much game to play, too much game to play. For me, I would imagine it's probably the same for a lot of other players. Path of Exile 2 marked a second opportunity to get in on this game on the ground floor before this ship set sail. A chance.
I don't know how they're going to tackle that problem, though, because eventually PoE 2 will have that same issue. And I think that the way to solve it is to have a lot more educational content within the game, meaning that you don't have to step outside of the game. And that's even when you can bring in like content creators that have been making content for your game and paying them to make content for new players in the game, because I'm sure they would love that. The community would love that. And also, I think it would show the amount of respect that you have for the content creators within your game, because I think, especially nowadays, content creators are pivotal to a game's success. It really is, because if you have a lack of educational content and or good content for the game, less people will eventually be incentivized to play your game, because people don't just like see your games through marketing campaigns. A lot of it is discovered through YouTube nowadays. YouTube, Twitch, stuff like that. Like, think how many people Asmongold probably brought to PoE 2 just by watching all the promotional stuff, the interviews and stuff like that. Like, that's sort of how I discovered PoE 2.
Chance to understand the game on a fundamental level before the game evolves into a behemoth. And I am so glad that I did. This game is just so damn engaging, whether it's the combat, the spells, the abilities, the movement, the dodge rolling, the environments, the build crafting, or the items.
Dude, this is my favorite boss fight in the entire game. It's so sick. It's like the first final act boss fight, but oh my god, I love doing it. It's so fun.
Everything just draws you deeper and deeper into this game.
Dude, it took me, no joke, an hour and a half to like 2 hours to beat it the first time.
And it doesn't
But it was so fun.
let you go. I could make an entire video just talking about the boss fights in this game, the depth of their mechanics, their animations, the clear telegraphs, and their music. My gods, the music in this game. Start to finish, Path of Exile 2 feels like a more complete experience than 90% of the fully priced.
Yeah, I've said this. I said this in my like early access quote unquote review. Yeah. This, and people sort of get mad when I say this. Like in the comments, you have people like criticizing that opinion. But it's like either you haven't played the game or like you're just wrong, in my opinion. Because I think this game, the way it is right now, feels more complete than pretty much any other ARPG that I've played. Right? It feels more engaging, and I think that's evident through the fact that I finished the campaign like regular, cruel, and then I'm engaging with the end game, which has never happened in another ARPG before. So I think that's huge.
$70 AAA titles that I've played in the last few years. Every single time I sit down to play this game, I find something else that makes me sit back and say, damn, why is this so good?
Yes, 1000%. He's so right on that.
From my perspective, Path of Exile 2 feels like the first real evolution within this genre, the same way that Baldur's Gate 3 feels like the real evolution within turn-based or CRPGs, that generational leap that...
I have a lot of respect for Baldur's Gate 3. I don't think that I'll ever necessarily be able to finish the game just because, I don't know, it's not... I really do enjoy, like, action combat, and turn-based just doesn't feel like the thing for me. So... But I have a giant amount of respect for the story behind Baldur's Gate and how good it is and how many raving reviews they've gotten over the years for the game, right? I think that if everybody's unanimously agreeing that something is good, it's good.
That is damn near indescribable. I brought this up in a previous video, but I'm going to reiterate on this because this is exactly what I thought ARPGs would be like in the future. When I was trouncing around Champions of Norath, wielding swords imbued with fire and ice, jamming to Saturate by Breaking Benjamin.
Dude, he loves metal. Shout out. He has tons of like Spirit Box shirts, and I don't know if he hasn't listened to Slaughter to Prevail. I mean, he should. They're fucking incredible.
Daydreaming of what games I would play as an adult. This is exactly that game. It captures the essence of a true journey, that quest for power that many of us have been seeking from the moment that you begin, either if
this game is what everybody was hoping Diablo 4 would be, but just never was and never had a chance to be. This is like what Diablo 4 should have been. Diablo 4 beat them to the punch. They make a better game, though.
If it's your first character or if you're playing the game solo self-bound, the game hits hard. At times, it's gruelingly difficult, dodging projectiles, taking on massive bosses that make you feel just so insignificant, listening to the callouts to be able to avoid massive attacks, managing your health and mana, making sure that you're not overusing mana or healing flasks, surviving fights by the skin of your teeth, and constantly adjusting your build to take on new challenges.
Yeah, I agree. I've had to like redo my build like 2-3 times during different playthroughs of like campaign, cruel. Even in the end game right now, I'm like struggling quite a bit because I don't have proper resistances for everything. So yeah.
As you continue, you earn the power to gradually trivialize the game, and it slowly transforms into something that feels much more similar to Path of Exile 1, clearing screens of enemies with ease, zipping through maps and picking up loot. It's incredibly satisfying to build your first character, knowing that every step, every triumph, and everything you've done was earned through your own effort. That's how I've always wanted these games to feel, and Path of Exile 2 captures that feeling perfectly. I think one of the biggest strengths of this game and why it's performed so well is that it made itself so much more approachable to a wider audience without removing any of the complexity or depth that people enjoyed in Path of...
Yeah, that is a big thing. It's way more approachable, but there still is that depth, which I think is very difficult to do. And I think one of the things that most gaming studios fuck up on is that they do one or the other.
Path of Exile 1. They just removed a lot of the needless confusion from many of the game's systems. Skill gems specifically, yes, I understand that you can read tooltips in Path of Exile 1 to know what skill gems will support what support gems and vice versa, but look, I don't know what to tell you other than the fact that I don't want to read, and the vast majority of other players don't want to read either.
I mean, in PoE 1 too, it was like a fucking Bible. Like, you just had to read the Bible to, like, understand what everything did. Like, maybe I'm a little bit off on that and exaggerating, but that's what it felt like to me. And that's sort of what I was not super engaged with.
Not afraid to say that I need some bumpers in games to keep me on the right path, otherwise I'll get confused.
Yeah, and also, the bumpers don't hurt the experience of someone who already knows what everything does and wants to engage with even deeper levels of complexity within the game.
Make mistakes and ultimately give up because I'm just here to enjoy myself. That's why I quit Path of Exile 1. Multiple times over the years, every time I tried to play that game, I just couldn't figure out what I was trying to do. And if I ever made any mistakes, well, the game would then tax me by making me have all these different currencies that I need to be able to respec my skill tree. And I'm not going to go farm that stuff. That's not fun. That's not engaging. That's boring. And I don't want to be punished. The revamped skill gem system and being able to respec with gold streamlined my experience. It just made it so much easier to engage with. It took away needless distractions, and it gave me more time to be able to understand and, more importantly, appreciate this game's world design, monsters, music, items, the skill tree.
Oh yeah, dude. The design of the game, it's just like everywhere you turn within the game, you just find some other reason to love it. And when I was like writing the review, it was like really hard to think of things that I actually had criticisms for. It's kind of why I haven't done a review for Marvel Rivals, is because I don't really have criticisms for it. And it feels sort of pointless to make a review for something that I have pretty much like almost no critiques for.
Skill gems, how skills can cascade off of one another, and all these different finer elements of the game. And I know I'm not alone in this. From my perspective, this is what it means when you're making a game for a broader audience. All of the depth and the freedom, it's all still there. All that skill expression is still there. But they're not gatekeeping it behind convoluted systems that just aren't necessary. Because if they were necessary, well, these developers would have kept it. How do I know that? Because there is so much care, attention to detail, and respect for the audience's intelligence and maturity in this game. Act 3 spoiler warning, but in the final act of this game, in the final act of early access, you go back in time to the Vol Empire. You make your way through this ancient city, colorful, beautiful, and prosperous. As you continue to make your way up the steps, each area hints at something darker. First, there's less color, then there's canals that seem to be filled with blood, and then at the summit, you see sacrifices and piles of body. At the end, you end up going into the Black Chamber. This entire area is like Aztec meets Prometheus meets Hellraiser, body horror, ritual sacrifices, lasers cutting cadavers, people being kept alive with their spines removed. I was so intrigued by this place.
Yeah, dude, the world building, the level design is so sick. It's insane.
It was so foreign and horrifying.
I'm a bigger fan of how like Diablo sort of engages with some of this stuff, right? Like I'm much more interested in like angels and demons for some reason. Maybe it's because I was like raised Catholic or something, but I really like that sort of stuff. But the way Diablo 4 did it wasn't like, I would have loved to see what a dev team like PoE2 could have done with the same material. I think it would have been a lot better. Maybe not storytelling wise, because I wouldn't say that PoE2 is like the greatest narrative that I've ever seen, right? I think it's fine, it's good, but yeah, I think that would have been sort of interesting. But I love what they did with PoE2, and to an extent PoE1, though I couldn't really get that far into the game to really appreciate it on the same level as PoE2.
I couldn't stop studying the map. The creativity, imagination, freedom, and sheer disregard for anyone that could be offended by this. This is only possible when you have a studio and leadership that cares about making their game. That's exactly what kind of game this is. It's so rare to see a studio that develops a game that's really their own, and Grinding Gear Games owns Path of Exile 2. This goes back to a discussion that we had previously, studios and publishers creating games for audiences that they're not a part of. Good games, from my perspective,
I've never seen that, damn. I never noticed that, because I was getting fucked up in this area every time, on both regular and cruel. I was getting absolutely annihilated, because I didn't have any res for anything, so I didn't have time to look around. I was getting fucked.
Translate across generations. You don't need to water down the mechanics or your story. You don't need to simplify the gameplay. You don't need to talk to the players like they're children. I can't imagine a universe in which, if they felt something that was necessary to maintain the integrity of Path of Exile 2, that they wouldn't keep it in the game no matter the cost of player retention or its accessibility to new players. You can feel the authenticity, you can feel the beating heart of this game, and you can feel that they own it. This is going to be a topic for a future video. I just have to write the script for it and actually do a lot of the research. But have you guys noticed that over the last few years, making a game for everyone means making a game that won't offend anyone? It's not about the content.
Yeah, that's like one of the most frustrating things about the state of modern gaming.
Content that's delivered. It's not about what the game is actually going to be like. It's about making something that's going to look good in the eyes of critics, in the eyes of the media, in the eyes of social media more than anything else. How are you supposed to make anything that's authentic, creative, or engaging if you're so worried about hurting someone's feelings? That's just not where their priority.
Yeah, it's just not going to work. It's just straight up not going to work.
Priorities are. Path of Exile 2 is definitely not worried about stepping on anybody's toes, that's for sure. And I think that's where the industry has faltered over the last couple of years. I mean, look at the state that things are in. We have mature rated games that are coming out that feel like they're made for elementary school kids. Characters with interchangeable personalities, romances, and relationships that are so flaccid that you wonder whether or not the writers even have interacted with human beings outside.
Man, I wonder what game he's talking about here. I don't know.
Of Reddit. Lowering their standards constantly, either through gameplay or through the game's narrative, ultimately damaging the quality of that game in the end. They don't know who to listen to. They keep paying attention to the wrong things. I think that's why Path of Exile is so special.
It feels like they're just not listening to gamers. They're just not listening to actual people who will engage with their product in their game. They just don't listen to those people. They think that their opinion is invalid because they think they are lesser than them, which isn't the case. Because if you're building a product, then you're building it for an audience. And if you look down upon that audience, then you're never going to be able to make a good product for them because you think you're better. But you're not. You're building a product for them. How the fuck could you be better?
I think that's why Path of Exile 2 is so special, because they've come to realize when to listen to themselves and when to listen to their audience. They know when to listen to the audiences that they don't have yet either. That's a really tough balancing act to be able to pull off, because you have to be able to know when and when not to listen to all those people, because all of their feedback at any given time is going to either be valuable or detrimental.
I think that's something too that the devs do really well, is balancing that, because it seems like there's certain things right now in PoE2 that people disagree with them on, but they're sort of putting their foot down. They're kind of like, well, this is what we think, and this is what we're going to do, right? That's important. And it doesn't mean that they can never go back on that decision. They seem to be open to going back on their sort of feelings-based decisions. But for now, especially with the game being in early access, they're sort of testing a lot of the waters with that and seeing if their feelings and theories on the game will hold up. And that's important.
Detrimental to your game. And I think in a lot of cases, some studios just turn off the sound entirely. They just don't listen to anybody, and they just...
Yeah, think of Call of Duty. They've done that quite a few times. Didn't end up going very well for them. Wonder why.
go off of what, I don't know, maybe some marketing team wrote down or something like that. You know, I look at a game like Halo Infinite, right? And this is a really good example of this. They listened to the veteran player base, the veteran Halo player base that was like, no battle royale. At the peak of battle royale popularity. While that game had a litany of issues, you don't think that probably would have helped the game's popularity? Oh,
yeah. I think some games make the mistake of listening to the top echelon of players, Valorant, but yeah, that means that generally you're gonna leave casual players in the dust. Valorant.
a little bit? I mean, come on. It would have given it a little bit of something. Grinding.
And I used to hold the opinion that that was good. I don't anymore because of Valorant, because of what that game is going through right now. The bones of the game are still incredible. I still love the game, but it's really running into growing pains now that it feels like a lot of the casual player base has just been eroded. Like there's fucking no casual players left. And I think the content even shows for that too, which is really fucking bad. You have people like Eggwick pretty much completely leaving the scene and like recently coming back. And we're going to check out his video because he did a video on where he thinks Valorant's heading, and it doesn't look very good for content creators like him who don't run their channels off improving at the game or following esports or stuff like that. There's just nothing for them.
Grinding Gear Games proves over and over again throughout the entire history of Path of Exile 1, and now they're doing it again with Path of Exile 2, and we're going to get into that.
But I do think that Riot is sort of, there could be a promising future. Because if you look at the way they're treating League now, Valorant could get that same treatment. I think TFT was a good move, even though I don't really care about the mode. TFT was a good move. I think they're introducing new game modes to League that are more casual player friendly, which is really good. And they could do the same thing for Valorant.
But they know when to listen to their audience, and they also know how to have humility when they're wrong. Because you also have to be able to admit that you're wrong at different times. Because I'm sure there's some things in the game that are in there right now that the players hate, that the developers think needs to be there.
Yeah, this is the trials could be a really good example. I'm curious to see what happens 6 months down the line with trials and how they're going to handle that. Because in their opinion, ascendancy points are not something that everybody should attain. But I'm not sure if they're going to keep that same position like 6 months down the road. We'll see. I'm open to either. But I think that could be a good example that we can look back on in 6 months and see what happens.
And at one point in time, they're going to probably just give it a chance and see how it goes. But you also know how you got to know when to be able to put your foot down and say no in some cases. Because I've seen, the whole reason I'm bringing this up is because I've seen a lot of people that have been talking about the skill gem system and how it needs to revert back to Path of Exile 1.
Please don't do that. Please don't do that. No, just don't do that.
I don't know if I would play this game if they did that. I mean,
yeah, straight up. Same here. Don't know.
I probably would because I have a better understanding of the general systems, but I'm going to let you know just a change like that is enough to completely disrupt this game being able to reach a wider audience.
But I think one thing that they're doing well too is they're not doing the Overwatch where they're deleting the first game, not letting you play it, and forcing you to play the sequel, right? PoE 1 is not going anywhere. They're going to be developed alongside each other.
And at the end of the day, you want more players. That's how this game maintains its success. It's how it makes more money. It's how they continue to be able to deliver you more content in the future. I'm sure they took some pretty big risks on trying to put this game out. And that's one of the key pillars from my perspective of what's making this game so much more accessible to a wider audience and why it's so much more popular than it normally would have been. You know, I think that's one of the reasons why players have come to trust them. It's because they know when to listen and they know when not to. They know how to prioritize whatever their creative vision for the game is and how to also listen to their players when it really matters. And that's something that I think that they've really done a good job at cultivating over the years. That's the audience that they've created. That's the community that they've created.
And it's something that they're showing us through doing interviews with people like DM and other people in the content creator space for the game. Is they're being candid, they're being honest, and when they're sort of like surprised by a question, they will sort of ponder it. If John is on with, God, what's his name? I forget his name. But if it's multiple devs, they're going to sort of talk it out back and forth during the interview and kind of try and come to a conclusion, or say, we haven't actually considered that. We'll have to get back to you on that. Which is also a very fine and fair answer, in my opinion.
And from my perspective, that's the most valuable thing that the industry needs to learn from Path of Exile 2. I was a part of Baldur's Gate 3's early access, and throughout that entire process, I kept asking myself, why isn't everyone on Earth playing this game or talking about it? Now, little did I know that's exactly what ended up happening with that game, but even when that game was barely playable at times, you could feel that there was something truly special going on there. You could feel it in the gameplay, in the narrative, the way that the developers communicated and involved their community. Path of Exile 2 is emulating and replicating those same markers for success. Path of Exile 2 is using early access in the way that it's meant to be used. They're directly engaging with their community, and every action they take feels like a refreshing contrast to how players are often treated by other studios and publishers. Too often, players are treated like the enemy or cash cows, and it's no surprise why those games end up failing. When I
Yeah, seriously, straight up.
interviewed Jonathan Rogers, I had one burning question about the game's monetization. In an industry that is constantly trying to squeeze its customers, why would Grinding Gear Games transfer all of their purchases from Path of Exile 1 to Path of Exile 2? From a business perspective, they were leaving money on the table. Why not just reset everything and start everybody off fresh?
Yeah, that's a good point. That is a really good point. They did do that, which is pretty much unheard of. Right? That was a big scandal for Smite, right? Going from Smite 1 to Smite 2 is that your cosmetics would not transfer to the next game. And that's probably why it's been like massively review bombed. But I don't know. I haven't played the game, right? So I don't know if it's a bad game. But I do remember that being a giant controversy when they announced Smite 2.
In a new microtransaction ecosystem.
What are the incentives that we as a company will have depending on how we structure this? So I'm like, okay, if we make sure that the microtransactions span across both games, that means that as a company, we will have an incentive to make sure that Path of Exile 1 continues to receive content, because we will still be getting monetization from that. Because the feeling that players will have is that PoE 1 is still getting, because PoE 1 will still be getting monetization because of the fact that all that stuff goes back as well as forwards. That means that we'll always be incentivized to support it. So
smart. Yeah. Awesome.
Effectively, I wanted to build into what the company's what the company is doing, a way to incentivize us to do the right thing here. And so that's part of the reason why we did it that way. It doesn't matter for those things, right? If our goal is long-term success of PoE 2 and 1, then it really, we can make this, and I don't think it should really hurt us at all in the long term. So I think just for several reasons, it was the right move to do. And obviously players, are very happy about it as well. It makes the people who played the game before feel valued, and we're not just going to throw this stuff in the garbage whenever we decide to do something new, which I think is very important. There's that feeling of we actually care about all that stuff that we sold you before. So I think that all of that stuff combined really does just make for, to me, a no-brainer decision. So this wasn't a
no-brainer decision. Hell yeah. Love it. This is why I have so much trust in GGG, is hearing stuff like that. Hearing stuff like that just makes me trust them so much.
Difficult decision at all. It was something that was very obvious to us right from the point when we decided to make PoE 2, and so I guess that's the sort of our thinking behind it.
Why devalue what players purchased? Why undermine their trust? Their goal is to bring in new players while keeping the current ones engaged, and by honoring what players have already bought, they're maintaining the trust that they've built over time. New players will buy new things, but why throw away the loyalty of the ones that you already have? Look at the industry today, Jagex and old school RuneScape putting out surveys wanting to put in ads into their game and make account security a paid feature, or Ubisoft, who, quote, accidentally put ads into their pause menu and then claimed it was a bug later.
Oh, that was, yeah, that happened. That certainly did happen.
or their statements about how players need to get used to not owning games for them to be able to use their rental services. Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth put New Game Plus behind a paywall.
What? Okay, that that I didn't know. That I've never heard of. That's crazy.
Industry continues to push monetization tactics that devalue the player's experience, while developers like Grinding Gear Games are choosing to, well, give back, supporting their audience with free and meaningful content while also respecting the content that those players spent money on. This player-first mentality is woven throughout everything that Path of Exile 2 has done so far. I remember when I was talking to Jonathan Rogers about their decision to shift their focus from the campaign to the endgame, his reasoning felt like pure common sense. Games like this are defined by their endgame. That's why players keep coming back. And if they didn't have an endgame that was solid, or if an endgame wasn't there, then they would find themselves in the same position that Blizzard did with Diablo 4, promising an endgame later. And that's a much harder hole to dig yourself out of rather than fixing a couple things or adding a campaign. Grinding Gear Games has mastered the art of balancing both the needs of its players and its development team. They learned that players are going to get the most value out of the end game, and by focusing on it, they're just making a better game for everyone. Plus, it's a grind that they know all too well from supporting Path of Exile 2, which means that they can move much faster, deliver more content, and more fun to both the team and the players. And the crazy thing is, they've already proven that. A month into Path of Exile 2's launch, and they just released a massive patch that addressed a bunch of bugs and issues and crashing and implemented a ton of player feedback. Players had complained about repetitive towers on the Atlas map, so they added more tile sets. They rebalanced gear prefixes and affixes to make loot feel more rewarding.
Dude, watching him play PoE 2 just makes me want to go play it literally right now. Like I want to go play it.
Increased monster density in certain areas, and they added respawns to the pinnacle boss and a ton of other improvements. What really struck me about this update, the game's first update, beyond just how jam-packed it was with improvements, was how humble the developers were when they were discussing it. During the Tavern Talk podcast with my friend Darth Microtransactions and his co-host Gazi TV, Jonathan Rogers spoke about the changes.
Mark, that's who I was thinking of.
And how they had came to their decisions for the things that they put into the game. The whole time, they never acted like they were married to any single idea. Jonathan would often say, if the players think that's an issue, I'll look into it. Or if this idea doesn't work out, we'll change it. The humility and the respect for the players is exactly what makes this game so successful. I think this is why players trust Grinding Gear Games and Path of Exile. Authenticity, respect, and humility. You know, trust is a delicate thing.
He didn't touch on it, but John and Mark both play the fuck out of this game. Like, they are both very experienced players in their own rights, in their own game. And that's really important. If you want to make good design choices, you need to understand your own game and be able to play it at a high level. And I think they both can and both do.
Especially in today's gaming industry. With every single new release, there is a sense of uncertainty. We get trailers that have little to no gameplay. We rarely get demos, and prices continue to rise.
Oh, yeah, dude. When the marketing for this game was almost entirely gameplay. That's pretty much all I saw. Like, I remember seeing the monkey fight, or when they were showing off the tack for mercenary and stuff like that. Like, it was the abilities, really, skills. Yeah, like, that's so important nowadays, because if you look at even Assassin's Creed Shadows, how much of it was actually gameplay that was shown? Like, almost none of it.
Rise. Microtransactions are more prevalent than ever. Publishers want to bring games to $100, and it feels like the industry is at odds with its own audience. With studios,
I think it's fine if you want to charge more. Make better games, though. You need to earn the right to charge more. And I don't think game studios are earning that right.
Believing that they know better than the players. Games often now come with their own agendas, or they have some attempt to deceive the player base in some way, shape, or form, and year after year, trust is eroding from this industry. I think it's crazy to look and realize that this game is only half of a game, half of the classes, half the gear, half the skills,
Yeah, half of the game feels more complete than Diablo 4. Half.
The campaign, half of everything. And we're seeing this much support and authenticity. And I'm hoping that players aren't taking this for granted, because this is an incredibly special moment for Path of Exile and just games in general, because on full release, this game is going to be a monster, and it's going to be something that's going to be remembered forever. Path of Exile and Grinding Gear Games stand apart because they are redefining what trust looks like within the gaming industry. Through their transparency, respect for their players, and their commitment to creating value rather than extracting it, they've created a game and a community built on genuine respect. In a time where many studios are more concerned with profit margins rather than the player experience, Path of Exile has become a rare example of how trust can still thrive within this industry. I think that the video game industry is headed for a significant shift, a major transformation, because I think that over the years, as the industry has grown and as more investor interest has come in and it's just gotten so much more corporatized, there's all this different money flowing in from all.
Yeah, I think the gaming budgets have like expanded, but the quality of the game releases have not improved by very much, if at all. So hopefully that means that people are going to wake the fuck up and not just spend exorbitant amounts of money to then charge more money to the players, and realize that at the end of the day, people don't really give a shit how much money you spend on your game. They care about the quality of the product that the players are receiving. And if you want to charge more, then you have to make a better product to the player. It can't cost more.
All over the place. You had a bunch of leadership that came from different industries that thought they could make a life for themselves here. And when you don't have creatives that are the ones that are leading the charge, they make products that fail, because you have to be both the creator and the intended audience to be able to reach some of these audiences in the first place. You know, when I look at, you know, Ubisoft, EA, Activision, Blizzard, you know, these companies that have already successful live service games, and then I look at some of the failures in live service that we've seen over the last couple of years, you see how these games basically just straight up copied the same formula that was successful for some of these other games. And it makes a lot of sense why those games failed. Because if I'm a player that was playing some of these games and they've done nothing to build trust with me, and I'm still invested in those games, I'm still playing them, I have friends that are playing them or whatever it might be, why would I go to a different game that's going to do the exact same thing on paper? I mean, like T for T, right? Like it's a 1-for-1 copy. I think that's one of the reasons why Marvel Rivals found success, is because, I mean, they just changed one single thing, which is, oh, you don't have to pay to be able to unlock heroes like Overwatch. You don't have to be in a battle pass or anything like that. You just get the character once it launches, simple as that. And that's enough to be able to turn players in the other direction, because that
oversimplification. But yeah, that is part of it for sure.
Generates some level of trust, because they go, oh, these guys aren't trying to, you know, beat me over the head and steal my wallet every single chance that they get. They look at it even as a small sign of trust, and they go for it. You know, I've talked about this a couple times. This is another, like, one of those random video ideas that I'll put out at one point in time. But I do think that I don't think that the silent majority exists the same way that it used to. I brought this up in another video, but I think with the growing influence of social media, that even if players are not directly engaged with a game or with the game's audience, or, you know, the community feedback or whatever it might be, maybe they're not watching the YouTube videos or whatever, I think they're still indirectly influenced by the things that are going on with those games. So, as an example, with Baldur's Gate 3, do you guys have any idea how many people had reached out to me that had either heard about the game through somebody else, they heard about how it didn't have microtransactions or whatever it might be, they hear about how well they treat their player base from somebody else, and then they want to come and try the game? That happens a lot.
Word of mouth. I alluded to this before, like earlier. Yeah, 100%. Word of mouth.
Because maybe
Huge.
you have a friend that's really engaged in these communities and these conversations, but that friend's end up recruiting the rest of their friends and bringing those people in to come and play these games.
Word of mouth marketing. Most powerful marketing there is. I'm not going to lie. It's true. That's how it is.
Yeah, I think that's what's selling games right now. I think authenticity and respect and trust are the things that are on sale. I think those are the things that players are attracted to. I hear that a game doesn't have microtransactions. I'm more interested in it. I hear a game doesn't have its own odd agenda. I'm interested in it. I hear a game is made because it's the creative vision that they genuinely have. I'm interested in it. And that's the thing that's really pushing out a lot of these games. And if you look back at some of the most successful games that we've had over the past couple of years, those are those games. Those are the things that the players are talking about the most. And that's ultimately what led them to buy those games in the first place.
True that. Amen, brother.
And I think that's probably the biggest lesson that the industry needs to learn. I've been having an absolute blast with Path of Exile. The entire time that I've been sitting here, I've been itching to get back to playing the game.
Yo, fucking same, bro. Jesus.
Basically spinning in circles right now because I still haven't fought the pinnacle boss or anything like that. But I've just been having
I'm so far away from that.
so much fun playing the game. It's been great playing it with friends too. I've had friends that have gotten into the game that I would have never thought.
Yeah. I'm waiting for the free to play to come out. But if I have friends who do play like Diablo 4 and I see it, I'm just going to recommend them PoE 2 and they're going to never play Diablo 4 ever again. And that's going to be very good for them.
Would have played this game. And they are in way deeper than I am. I'm talking like I got a buddy of mine, it's like 350 hours in. And I'm like, you have a job.
Dude, yeah, yeah. Some people are going crazy with this game, but hey, I respect it. The game is very good. If you're going to do it for a game, fuck it. Do it for this one. Yeah.
How do you even do that? But I'm really excited to see what this game's future is. I really am, man. I've had so much fun with this game. I said it before. It's giving me the same vibes as Baldur's Gate 3, and that was such a special experience.
For me, it gives me Elden Ring vibes, but that's because I couldn't really get through most of the Baldur's Gate 3 game. Just turn-based. It's not my thing, right? I respect the game immensely. I respect Larian. Turn-based is just not for me. I think that's what it comes down to.
And it's going to get the same kind of support. What can you say, man? It's exactly what you want. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did, make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel.
Dude, shout out. Let me make sure. I'm already subscribed. Like the video. Dude, shout out to Legendary Drops. I love watching his videos. I enjoy his content so much. I even tune into some of his streams sometimes if I have the chance, just to see what he's talking about. He usually just talks about like game industry news and just like chats it up with us. So it's pretty dope. But yeah, respect to him, man. Another one of those content creators who, like DM, Darth Microtransactions, just sort of was in a weird position in life and took up content creation, and eventually it just sort of works out, right? I believe he was a construction worker who just started making these videos, and then eventually he just blew up, and now he can sustain himself off making really good content, really entertaining content, and talking about the games industry. And I have a ton of respect for anybody who can make that happen for themselves, because it's obviously really difficult. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I'm going to do the same and ask you to like and subscribe if you appreciate the content. Thank you so much. This was a bit of a long react. I'm not going to lie, even for my standards. But I really do love PoE 2, and I have a lot to say about the game because I love it so much. And it's going to be my game of the year in 2025. That's just what's going to happen. And I honestly think if you're still playing Diablo 4, buy the early access. You will not regret it. You will have so much fun. And you're going to wonder why you spent so much time playing Diablo 4, which is the inferior product. But yeah, thank you so much. And I will catch you in the next one, guys. Peace.